Last month, the state fire marshal told Macon County officials their jail was a fire hazard, unsafe and unsanitary. And the fire marshal said officials could either improve the facility or close it. For almost 6 years prior to that order, inspections had found the facility lacking, and inmates had filed suits and complaints seeking to force officials to improve the Macon County Jail. Well, today, county officials and Prison Commissioner Fred Smith announced that the jail is now in compliance with state standards. That after 2 weeks of working on wiring, lighting, plumbing, and alarm systems.
And what we've done, we've used talented inmates, electricians, plumbers, and so forth, to go in and completely renovate these jails where the sheriffs and the county commissioners and so forth have responded to this need, responded to this free work from the state. This particular jail would have cost a little over $50,000 to bring it up to the standards, and we've now brought it to the standards using free labor and with the help of the county commissioners and $7,000.
County Commissioner Ronald Green says the commission will also decide whether it will hire additional jailers or install a monitoring system to bring them into full compliance with state codes. Meanwhile, he says they still don't know how the jail improvements will affect federal Judge Robert Varner's ruling on complaints filed by Macon County inmates. Judge Varner heard those complaints last month but delayed making a ruling for 90 days. Inmate attorney Walter Chandler says while the improvements may satisfy state codes, they don't address all of his clients' specific complaints, such as inadequate space and inhumane treatment. Lois Russell, WSFA TV News, Tuskegee.
Important in having a place for those persons
care for our children in need was conceived in May of 1982.
Pensions and security officials say their department doesn't have enough money to take care of the 1 million Alabamians who need food stamps or protection from abuse. The vice chair of the state board explained the department's position to the governor.
In the last few years, the demand for services has increased, but resources have not kept pace with the very real and growing needs.
Dr. Nixon told the governor that DPS has been hit hard by federal budget cuts, but those dollars haven't been replaced by state funds. Governor Wallace responded by asking for support for his tax increase packages, saying that more money for the general fund would eventually mean more money for DPS. But the department doesn't get any money now from the general fund, and that's a sore spot with DPS.
We need to, because of the tremendous demands upon our department, because of the tremendous increases in the services that are required by our department. And of course, if we're to maintain our ongoing services at the same level that we are, we would have to have some participation in the general fund.
Commissioner Frazier says he is not optimistic about getting money from the general fund during the 1984-85 budget year. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
Look at all those awful spots. Goodness. You think if I touch him, I might get the spots too? Did Tommy talk to his teacher? Not yet. Who is it?
Well, hello there. I'm Mr. Straightley, and here's Miss Caseworker. And we want to talk to you about something very important. Here's Kenny and Johnny to help us tell you about...
Okay, it's the next call E. Call E.
Let's go back on the record. We'll get the paper for it.
Board report through February on an intra-state basis was a non-quantified cost saving associated with people planning to be transferred from federal annual concessions other things like this. The union had a lot to say in all that. The total relief in the overall picture, he showed in return.
Days of these hearings, you were asked some questions regarding the ranking of Bell South.
Regional holding company, including some of the largest states in the nation.
You were also running net income and quarterly dividends.
On the basis of total net income. So using that as part of the rationale.
The legendary St. Johns River in North Florida is known as the bass capital of the world. Any cast can result in the fishing dream of a lifetime, catching a trophy class 10-pound bass. The allure of big bass and bigger bucks lured 238 professional bass anglers from 26 states to the super-rich $300,000 Super Bass 3 tournament conducted by the Bass Angler Sportsman Society at Palatka, Florida. The anglers plucked down $1,250 entry fee each, hoping to parlay their fishing skills into winning the $100,000 top prize, the richest payoff in professional bass fishing.
I thought it was, I can tell you. What do you think it was? I thought it was about 14 pounds, I really did.
For 4 days fishing, that's a total weight of 53 pounds, 11 ounces. And for Doug Gilley, his dream has come true. He's won Super Bass 3, a prize worth $82,000 cash and an $18,000 Ranger bass boat rig.
Special children, I want to say thank you from them to you.
Had a great time and I won an Olympic medal and everything.
Bye, Mom.
Y'all put him on like a Coke. We'll go get him if you want him.
My dad will be so good.
Nice one, Coach. Player, Coach. Great.
Go, boy, go, baby. Go. Get on it. Go.
Hang up right there. Fine shot, Fred.
Buddy Gardner's recent streak of good play began with a third-place finish at the Greater Greensboro Open earlier this month. Buddy had a chance to win the event. He trailed the leader by just 2 going into the final 18 holes. But Gardner could not muster a serious challenge over the final day. That was not the case Sunday in Houston. This birdie putt gave Buddy Gardner a share of the lead with just 9 holes left. But Gardner was again denied his first PGA victory, this time by rookie Corey Pavin, who 2-putted from 20 feet on 18 to defeat Buddy by just 1 shot. Gardner's second-place check for $54,000 was his largest paycheck in 7 years on the tour, and his second-place finish equaled his best finish ever. But he finished second in the Tucson Open and Anheuser-Busch Classic in 1979. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
I may have to resort to, do we have broad, is that going to, the way the bill is written, does that affect this
private partnership? Future you envision for the programs of the
task force meeting.
It is not in the bill right now. We're hoping that we may be able to participate in the general fund in some way before the budgets become law. If not, then we're hoping that we might be able to get some kind of consideration for an increase in our trust fund in some way.
The speeds are going to be a little higher. Of course, the weather will determine that, but if it's fairly cool, I see speeds maybe 203 or 4 miles an hour at Talladega.
Being we won down there last year, then naturally we're looking forward to going back. We ran good in the fall race down there also, and I think we wound up fourth. That's been one of our racetracks that we usually run good, and we've had trouble finishing a lot of races. But when we do finish, we finish right up front.
I'd love to run good at home. I've won at Talladega a few times, and it certainly is quite a thrill to win in front of the home folks. They've been behind me so much in the whole state of Alabama that I really feel especially warm there and comfortable with the fans. The track is awesome, and we see those great big high speeds, and we see the big long freight train drafting situations, and the excitement is really there.
As the movie began and the phone banks of the Adam Walsh hotline were still relatively quiet, small groups gathered around TV monitors and relived the tragedy. Earlier in the day, Wayne Quincy of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement warned the volunteers that manning open national phone lines wouldn't be easy.
Expect anything, because we're going to get a lot of crazy calls, okay? It always happens with a toll-free number.
The TV drama depicted facts that shocked the country. The original broadcast of the movie was a major factor in convincing legislators that laws and policies concerning missing children needed strengthening. In 1981, 6-year-old Adam Walsh was abducted from a shopping center in Hollywood, Florida. A massive search began. 2 weeks later, John and Reve Walsh finally learned that Adam had suffered a horrible death.
They found our baby to death.
The Walshes became leaders in the fight to improve the chances of finding missing children. Tonight, Reve Walsh was on hand as the phones started ringing.
It was a bitter thing that happened, but everything that's happened since then has been just about the opposite of our experience. And I think it says a lot for America that we can turn things around and make something good out of something so bad.
Dan Molina, NBC News, Tallahassee, Florida.
The people that have rallied behind us.
So much for suspense. The New England Patriots traded with Cincinnati for the #1 pick April 11th and immediately signed Nebraska receiver Irving Fryer to a contract.
We had Irving rated the #1 player in the draft at the end of the football season, even prior to anybody being signed by anybody else.
So much for suspense. The Houston Oilers, who have the #2 pick, signed Nebraska lineman Dean Steinkuhler, the Outland Trophy winner, on the eve of the draft.
This is the place where I wanted to go, and this was my choice, and I'm just happy to be here.
The New York Giants will draft third.
I would love to play for the New York Giants. Being from New York, I've been a Giant fan for 22 years now, and I would like nothing better to go back there and maybe lead them to a Super Bowl in a couple of years.
Sorry, Boomer. The Giants have revealed their intentions to tab Michigan State linebacker Carl Banks unless they go for a last-minute trade.
I think the draft has changed so dramatically because of the establishment of the United States Football League. I think the National Football League has done a very poor job of matching the personality possibilities of talent by not moving their draft up to coincide with that of the United States Football League.
Not all is lost, however. For you Auburn fans, Donnie Humphrey and Lionel James don't know where they will play yet. Other Tigers will be following the draft as well. And Tide fans, Malcolm Simmons should go pro.
You know, I really don't know what's going to happen. It's one of those things that you really don't know what's going to happen until the final outcome is told. And so I'm just kind of excited, kind of sitting around waiting on it. You know, if things work out, you know, I thank the Lord for it. If they don't, then I thank the Lord for it also, because, you know, there's always going to be something and purpose for me in life somewhere. So I'm just kind of excited about it and ready for it, really.
We don't have a pick until the 42nd. We took Richard Todd with our first-round draft choice and thought it was a heck of a choice. and we don't pick till the 42nd player. Then we have 2 third-round picks, so we'll get 4 or 5 good football players, and we'll still get a couple, 3 free agents.
Short as reasonably possible. I do not mean to preempt any question you may have on this council and spending city's money, but as 7 or 8 years ago now.
The resolution has been adopted.
Communications and computers are becoming interlocked in such a way that we have to work these things together. Communications doesn't function without computers today. Your local telephone systems have computers running them and so on.
I know that I can count on the men and women of the Teleprocessing Center and its subordinate organization to continue that pursuit of excellence, that continue that support for the Air Force's mission to fly, fight, and win.
In the District Attorney's Office of each judicial circuit.
Mr. Speaker, I have a substitute.
Clerk receives substitute. House Bill 721 with amendments. That's all.
Mr. Speaker.
Nice.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr.
Speaker.
Speaker and Mr. Clark, thank you. I agree with you. Exactly right.
One, I don't think you can do it without hurting somebody. And number two, it's going to put a lot of schools out of business. So I urge you to support this amendment. Please.
Gentlemen.
Order of the Rules Committee.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Dale.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, now you come here and you put a controversial Senate bill up at the head of a 111 bill special order calendar. I don't care how the Rules Committee.
Speaker and Mr. Turnham, I have no objection.
Discussion on the motion. All in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
Unanimous.
The ordinance has.
I'm sure of the figure, but it's somewhere between 300,000 and 500,000.
That's a good citizenship way to do that.
Broke the trains resurfaced and so forth, and that property for the railroad. Chief Summerlin, who is our nominee,
All in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
Unanimous.
The resolution has been adopted.
If anybody should be honored tonight, it should be you, because, I mean, I think I should thank you, and you should be the one honored, because I'm just a product of what you've made me. And I'm very proud of Enterprise, and I just thank you very much.
It doesn't matter if it's high school football. It doesn't matter if it's the band. It doesn't matter if it's the guy who fixes the cable on your TV. There's a standard of excellence here in this town. And that's something else that you can't take for granted. It makes you a little bit special.
1903, replacement year was noted in your company document as 2005.
Yes, and that would have been the projected service life, by that time.
Replacement year for the Birmingham East Lake Switch coaching, 1976. The replacement year, same computation, that is to take the equipment line and divide it into
Tell me about old Donnie Humphrey getting on that ball.
I don't think we'll ever live it down in practice next week.
This was President Carter's third visit to Samford University's Cumberland Law School. He was there for the school's annual Law Day observance. Admitting little knowledge of law, Mr. Carter talked primarily about a subject more familiar to him, the presidency. The former president isn't very pleased with the way his successor is handling the job. That displeasure was evident during much of his speech, but later, when questioned by reporters, Mr. Carter became even more specific in his attacks on the Reagan administration. He says President Reagan's decision to mine the harbors off Nicaragua is an embarrassment to the country.
It's an absolute violation of international law for a nation like ours to mine the harbors of another country. And in the process, we have damaged ships not only of the Soviet Union, but also of countries like France and Japan.
Mr. Carter also accused President Reagan of endangering previous administration's efforts to achieve world peace by adopting a policy of non-negotiation.
Quite often, even when people desire to negotiate, as is the case with several entities in Central America, the policy of our government now is no, we will not negotiate unless certain unacceptable prerequisites are fulfilled. I think this has led to unnecessary bloodshed and continued conflict between people.
And what about someone to replace President Reagan in the White House? Jimmy Carter has one man in mind.
Well, I'm from Mondale and have been ever since 1976.
Lois Russell, WSFA TV News, Birmingham.
Is being addressed here at that particular committee level was basically agreed who might be involved in this. Once that's always dangerous because there may be somebody in this room wants to complain about it, so I may get one. Persons and students in our schools who are identified and caught with this in their possession at the schools, we're not going to just slap their hands and say, hey, don't do this again. I don't think that's the way we deal with it. Now, we're working at it from both ends, from an educational standpoint, but we're not going to condone it at all.
Glad to see him go with such a class organization as the Miami Dolphins. There are already several University of Alabama players with the Dolphins, and they've played very well, so I hope Joe will get the opportunity to fit right in there with them.
And there's a Shula with the Alabama football team, too.
Yes, it sure is. And
so there's a lot of ties there.
Yes, sir.
Hours of time to the city of Dothan, and without those, we would not have.
That's what I mean, is inevitable it is.
We just want a clarification on what the Sunshine Law is. We don't intend to operate behind closed doors, behind the public's back, but we do want to have the freedom to operate in your best interest at the times that we see fit when we can. Now, therefore, I can try to get the bill reform to be level to the superintendent protesting this act. Also, this government today reported that the 2.2% utility tax rate coming out of finance and taxation, education.
The governor brought out the good china and summoned the Senate for a discussion of his proposals to put property tax and income tax increases on the November ballot. At each place setting was a folder containing information on the proposed tax changes. Both have passed the House and are pending in the Senate. If approved, the maximum income tax rate for individuals and corporations would go from 5% to 6%, and 6 mills would be added to the current property tax rates. Together, the new taxes would generate about $153 million. Earlier in the day, another one of the governor's revenue measures cleared the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee. A bill to require municipal electric utilities to pay a 2.2% tax passed the committee on an 8-4 vote. If it becomes law, it will generate about $7.5 million for mental health and the general fund. It looked like it was going to be a pretty boring day in the Senate until Senator Chip Bailey of Dothan caught the upper chamber off guard and brought up a controversial 21-year-old drinking bill. The bill's major opponents didn't realize the bill was up until it was too late. This sparked some strong words from other senators who want to bypass the drinking age bill and work on some so-called non-controversial bills. Senator Bailey says if this bill isn't passed now, it will never come up. Senator Bailey finally backed down. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
And now let's go back to Bob Howell at our Wiregrass Bureau. Bob?
Thanks a lot, Gina. As we said earlier, we're speaking to you from the roof of the Houston Hall of Troy State University, Dothan, Fort Rucker, as we officially open up the Wiregrass Bureau, which will bring you news events from 7 southeastern counties. We have the capabilities of doing that live from most any location in this 7-county area. Earlier today, we officially kicked off the startup of the Wiregrass Bureau with a luncheon for some area business and civic leaders. The luncheon included a number of our staff members, not only from the news department, but also people who will be staffing the Bureau and department heads from across the station. This gave us a good opportunity to meet with the local leaders from the Wiregrass and to get to know some of them personally. Our general manager, Chuck Whitehurst, told the guests that the Bureau is fulfilling a 4-year dream of his, a plan he set in motion 4 years ago when he came to Montgomery to take over the reins as vice president and general manager for TV 12. The Wiregrass Bureau is going to be staffed by Cal Calloway and Mary Beth Boyd. The Bureau office, as we said, is located in downtown Dothan. Cal Calloway has some information tonight about the word wiregrass, where it came from and what it means.
When a lot of people hear the word wiregrass, this is what they think of. The long, stringy grass, which can be found along many southeast Alabama roads. But the word wiregrass is used another way, to describe the cluster of counties which make up the southeastern corner of the state. Variety may be the word which best describes a wiregrass, with a mixture of rural and urban, military and civilian. These are some of its communities: Fort Rucker, the home of Army aviation; Ozark, with its beautiful mansions in the downtown area; Enterprise, known for its monument to the boll weevil and its championship football; and Dothan, the largest city in the Wiregrass, a city some officials say that's now hit the big time with a population over 50,000. These are its events: Op with its Rattlesnake Rodeo, the World Championship Domino Tournament in Andalusia, and of course, the National Peanut Festival in Dothan. It's an area full of proud people, proud of how far the Wiregrass has come, and proud of what seems to be a bright future.
Cal is with us live from our Dothan Bureau, and we're delighted to have you on board. And Cal, I know there's a lot of news to cover out of the Wiregrass area.
We're already full this week, and we think there's a lot going on in the Wiregrass. We're looking forward to it.
Great. Mary Beth Boyd is the other person who's going to be staffing the Bureau here. She looked into the history of this particular building that we're on top of right now, and she found out a little bit about this historic spot on North Foster Street.
Houston Hotel has seen a lot of changes since its beginning in 1891. At that time, it was known as Thrasher Hall and was visited by many who traveled long distances to enjoy its cuisine, cooking, and free lodging for the wives of traveling salesmen. But in 1930, Thrasher Hall was torn down and Houston Hotel put into its place. Those who remember the old days considered it one of the most famous hotels in this part of the country. Since that time, its rooms have been the home of several businesses, including Dothan's first radio station. Today, Troy State University Dothan can be found here with some 900 students attending classes this quarter.
The ballroom is no longer a ballroom, but is the classrooms. It's been broken up into classrooms today. So the hallways that used to echo with the slow dragging feet of the weary traveler today, instead of that slow dragging feet, it echoes with the hurrying feet of students.
WSFA TV joins in with Houston Hotel's colorful history. Located in downtown Dothan, our new Wiregrass Bureau will be instrumental in bringing the news of the wiregrass to your home. A microwave dish has been put into place on the top of the roof. This will allow videotape to be fed to the Montgomery office in a matter of minutes.
Mary Beth is with us, and Mary Beth, we're delighted to have you on board. Look forward to big things from you.
Oh yes, we're definitely ready to go. We're ready to hit the wiregrass and report, and we're real excited. We are Channel 12's first bureau, so we've got a lot to look forward to.
Thanks a lot. Mary Beth, we're delighted to have you on board. Bob Ingram has some thoughts tonight about the wiregrass and the importance of TV 12 being here with the Bureau.
If you get the impression we're excited about the opening of our Wiregrass Bureau in Dothan, you read us right. We are excited. We're excited because we know the contribution it will make in providing you, our viewers, and you're the most important people we know, with the very best news coverage possible. From the day WSFA TV went on the air, and we'll be 30 years old in December, we've been committed to giving you first-rate news coverage. That's been our trademark. The opening of the Bureau in Dothan is a reaffirmation of that commitment. The Dothan Bureau represents a substantial investment by this station, offices, staff, sophisticated equipment. But it's an investment we gladly make to ensure that WSFA will remain your most trusted source of news. The opening of the offices in Dothan also underscores another fact, one that bears reiterating. WSFA TV is not a Montgomery station. It is your station. And no matter your mailing address or zip code, no matter where you might live in 12 country, you're as important to us as the people who live in Cloverland Apartments, which is about 50 yards from where I sit. At the risk of sounding immodest, we think WSFA TV News has done a darn good job in its first 30 years. But you ain't seen nothing yet. That's the way we see it tonight.
Thank you, Bob. And that is it for our premiere broadcast from the Wiregrass Bureau. Let's go back now to Montgomery and Gina Gregory for the rest of the newscast. Gina?
Okay, thanks, Bob. And when we come back, you'll meet...
There has been unconfirmed talk of special sessions for weeks in the halls of the Capitol, but today that talk took on more of an official tone. Representative Roy Johnson came before the House Ways and Means Committee with a bill making sweeping reforms to the corporate income tax structure. Representative Johnson, one of the administration's strongest supporters, told the committee to become familiar with the bill since it would be a major plank in the administration's effort to enhance the business climate in Alabama.
I want you to study it, I want you to be knowledgeable about it, and not find yourself falling off to the wayside, or look at the overall big picture of business and industry in Alabama.
And the Wallace administration has initiated weeks of discussions with business officials on a package of bills that businessmen feel will give the state an industrial facelift.
And industrial and Chamber of Commerce leaders from all across the state has worked cooperatively with the governor and cooperatively with the legislature in providing the needed revenues to enhance education and other state services. And it's now getting to a point where we need to look at their problems and go the second mile to provide the tools they need to provide jobs for our citizens.
Speculations by lawmakers as to when this special session might be called range from the day after the regular session to several weeks later, perhaps in June. But the leadership position is to keep people guessing.
Any special session would be speculative at this point, but in future special sessions or regular session, this bill is going to be back.
Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Business community, it's an effort to improve the overall business climate in Alabama. With legislators as they become more familiar with it.
There is little secret to the fact that there is a collective effort on a
know the house was on fire?
I happened to smell something burning and went back in that way, and that's what it was. When I opened the door, the curtains and clothes and things had been filled. It was been blazed.
The plans of it that we have. Consequently, Billy Joe are one of them every week, talking with him about here when the governor was in Japan, and he focalized a lot on the attention. A little late in saying thank you to you people, but we want you to know that you are welcome in Alabama.
We shall continue our quest to bring more industrial development to Alabama, because we feel that the nations of the world who have seen fit to build plants in this state have come to a place where people appreciate as much as any state in the Union.
This house waiting word, and I got the story that my mother told me that they called me yesterday evening about 7:30, and they already. I've talked with the coach out there, the head coach, and the defensive coordinator out there. I talked to Coach Coryell last night, and they want to fly me out tomorrow. Yeah.
What'd they say? They said they're glad to be able to have you?
Oh, yeah, they told me, welcome to San Diego, and come out here and give it 120% every day.
Talladega on Tuesday resembles the calm before a storm. Sunday, more than 100,000 people will fill these grandstands to see 40 of the fastest cars in the world tour this track at better than 200 miles an hour. The cars and their drivers began arriving Tuesday, and the question most asked of the drivers was just what will it take to grab the pole.
We've got several race cars that are going to run over 200 miles an hour. 202, 203 miles an hour, but if we catch the right type of day, overcast, a little bit of moisture in there, probably going to see some cars 204 or maybe 205.
Bonnet revealed NASCAR may soon make new rules to reduce speeds, as they did once before, and apparently they will make them this time with the driver's approval.
As people witnessed at Daytona, the car will take off, and it is an airplane at the point when it leaves the ground, and they're not designed to do that, so it's a very dangerous situation to be involved in.
Drivers Bill Elliott, Tim Richmond, and ARCA driver Davey Allison were also present for the pre-race activities Tuesday. Neil Bonnet showed up wearing a cast protecting a broken wrist he received Sunday in Martinsville. But he says it shouldn't hinder his performance behind the wheel Sunday.
Here, we probably don't move the steering wheel a total of 5 or 6 inches just to turn through these corners, so it's going to be the best place I go the first time. This track is excellent.
The governor wanted an 8% raise for state employees. The House passed an across-the-board $2,000 raise. And today, the Finance and Taxation Committee came up with an 11% state employee pay raise. This would bring the budget to run the majority of state agencies to $535 million. The pay raise and the budget could go before the full Senate tomorrow. Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley added another twist to the budget isolation controversy. A Montgomery Circuit judge has ordered the constitutional amendment that gives state budgets priority during the sessions back on the ballot in November. Lieutenant Governor Baxley says he agrees with the idea of budget isolation, but the proposed amendment needs some work. And he's asked some senators to work on a better amendment to submit to the voters in November.
And I'm hoping by the time we come back, maybe if we have to come in special session or next year, that anyway, before the people have to vote again on budget isolation, that we can submit one to them that not only does what the sponsors of the original one and Governor James wanted it to do, and the people thought it was doing when they voted on it, but will really work.
In other business, the Senate has passed a House bill to honor the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with a state holiday on the third Monday in January. That's the same day Alabama honors General Robert E. Lee. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
They're estimating 205 miles an hour. I would say that based upon what we can do and where we stand, it would be pretty tough to see 205. You know, maybe close to it, but you know, that's a pretty magic number.
So we've got several race cars that are going to run over 200 miles an hour, 202, 203 miles an hour. But if we catch the right type of day, overcast, a little bit of moisture in there, probably going to see some cars 204 or maybe 205. It's going to depend totally on the day, I feel like, what the speeds are.
with other cities and other countries around the world. Tourism is big business. Taiwan last year purchased approximately $18 million in soybeans from farmers here in the state of Alabama, and they pledged to do much, much more. And so there are tremendous trading opportunities that are already ongoing with the Republic of China on Taiwan, and of course, the opportunities for the mainland is even greater. That we did not lean too heavily toward Taiwan and vice versa. So we struck a balance, and that balance is that we will not get involved in the internal differences of any two countries.
At this junior high school, there are 850 students. 15 of them are from a special group called Gifted.
It really depends on the area it's in, but I think school's pretty easy.
How interested you are in a subject will almost dictate how well you're doing it.
I'm Tom Foreman, and join me for a look at Alabama's real-life whiz kids tonight in the TV 12 6 o'clock report.
My mother and father don't give me any pressure at all. School doesn't really give me, my friends don't give me any pressure at all either.
No, they don't do much to push Leslie Muir, and to look at her, she's just another schoolgirl with the same boundless energy and interest of any child her age. But when you talk to her, you begin to realize she's something special.
You know, some teachers do want you, they say, well, you're, not just to me, but to other students as well. that, you know, you should do well. I mean, you should try harder because, you know, you're up in the top group. But that's not really pressure. I think that's just telling you, you know, to go ahead and give it your all. I think school's pretty easy.
Leslie is part of the Tuscaloosa school system's program for gifted children. This is the Tuscaloosa Middle School. There are 850 seventh graders here. 15 of them are called gifted, and Norvin Richards is one of the best.
He's unique in a lot of ways. He has a lot of interests. He's interested in a whole umbrella of topics. He excels at each one of them.
Norvin has what his teachers call an extensive vocabulary. That is evident.
I want to be a paleontologist. It's just fascinating how, well, for example, how many misconceptions there are about humanoids, about hominids in early times. If you dressed an Australopithecus in a business suit and put him on a subway, no one would look at him twice. They look like us.
He doesn't worry much about grades. He makes mostly A's and B's, but his abilities clearly reach far beyond that indication. For example, Norvin recently took the Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SAT. It is a test normally taken by high school seniors, but this seventh grader scored higher than 98% of those students. Still, ironically, teachers don't necessarily want students like Norvin.
I find that hard to understand myself because he adds so much to a classroom. I can understand how he would be a threat, though.
This summer, Norvin will go to Duke University as part of a special gifted child's program there. Leslie Muir won't go. Oh, she's certainly very talented, but maybe she's a little young for that.
So where do you want to go from here? You're in what grade now?
5th. I don't really know. I just have to take things as they come, I suppose.
Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News in Tuscaloosa. Daryl Johnson is a gifted child, but he's also lucky. Daryl is a third grader at Montgomery's Brubaker School. It's a school with an unusually high number of students in its gifted program. Not necessarily because there are more talented children here, but simply because the program is open to more students.
Then the boy's going to tell the animals what their problem is.
But Daryl is also lucky in another way. He's in the gifted program despite the fact he's black. Teachers of gifted students say often they see a relatively small number of blacks in their classes. Again, they say, not because black children lack special skills. For example, Daryl today is writing a story.
I'm writing a story about a boy who's going to lose his pet, and he's going to get these animal detectives to help him out to find his pet.
Teachers say the limited number of black students in gifted classes is probably because our society as a whole pushes white males harder than any other students. In addition, they say, the better educated the parents are, the better the chance those parents will actively encourage placement of their children in a gifted program. But in spite of all this, there's no denying that many of the children in gifted programs are very talented. A gifted student wrote this computer program. And if anything, Brent Peacock, a gifted 8th grader, says there are some prejudices against those who are already in the classes.
One of the most misconceptions is that people in ISS or gifted classes are wimpy and they're not very athletic, but I'm heavily involved in baseball. I also enjoy golf and sports like that, and so I find that's one of the main ones.
Others would suggest the prejudice against gifted students goes much deeper than personal conflicts, that it may be the basic reason it took so long for gifted programs to get started in our public schools, and why even today educators say there's a long way to go. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. The music was written by Hector Berlioz, a 19th century French composer known for his orchestrating genius, and it's being played by what may be a 20th century musical genius. His name is David Rogers. He's 16 years old, a junior at Auburn High School. He makes A's almost all the time in almost every subject, but his forte is in music.
I would be very surprised if you could find me show me another student in Alabama with this much musical talent.
Tommy Goff has been band director here for 28 years.
his particular skill, the composing skill, I don't think we've ever had another student with that much ability in that field.
Composing, writing music. From classical to jazz, it's what David Rogers does best. It's what he started doing when he was 5 years old.
Took piano lessons in first grade, and for about 10 years. I didn't really get serious about it until 6th grade, when people started noticing what I was doing.
Of course, not many children get serious about anything in 6th grade, let alone parlay that interest into this kind of talent. He writes in his head, simply imagining how the many different instruments will sound, going to the piano only to check his ideas to make sure they'll work. David's family is, of course, proud of what he does. They give a good deal of credit to special programs at school for gifted children. They hope he can get into a college that will make the most of his talent.
If I can go into composing and make a living off of it, that's really my goal.
But perhaps nowhere will David's efforts pay off the way they do tonight. The high school jazz band is in concert, and the first number is one that David helped write.
So just how good is the 16-year-old? Listen.
I've heard it in my mind, kind of what I want it to sound like, and the first time I heard anything that I wrote from a full band, it just amazed me that it actually turned out the way I thought it would.
Do you think you're extremely talented?
Try not to. It's something I do.
Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News in Auburn.
The devastation and the life loss will be no greater than it is at this moment. The mayor regrets that he is not able to
remember those bereaved families and the sorrow that they feel, because we know that.
And the National Day of Prayer has become part of our unification as a great nation.
The pathway that you would have us today. Our Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning, and we thank you for this hour of all understanding. And my God, let this be, my God. For you came, oh God, to heal the broken heart.
While this is the most tragic storm Montgomery's seen in a long time, there are people who lost nearly everything that will say they're lucky. Take, for example, 31-year-old Andrew Korski of Todd Road. This is all that's left of his house after the twister touched down in his neighborhood.
I woke up and then looked out the window and see what was going on. And then so the roof started falling in. And all I did was got out of bed and lay down inside the bed, flat on the floor, till everything was over with. And the house just fell down around me.
And when he got up, he discovered he wasn't even scratched.
Glad it went none of me. Glad I'm still here. That's all I can say.
Just next door, Evelyn Holmes had opened up her store for business. There's not much left of the store that's been there for 30 years, but Evelyn is alive and well. Police say another man was equally lucky. He was headed down the northern bypass when the storm hit. He jumped out of his car and into a ditch. A falling steel beam landed inches from his head. And with the exception of being completely disrobed by the strong winds, he was uninjured. Willie Washington has a bittersweet story. His mobile home on Fuller Road had only minor damage, but his brother's trailer, just a half block away, was destroyed. He says his brother had called to warn him about the tornado.
Called me and said, man, you better get out of that trailer. Said it's a tornado warning. So I said, okay, so, you know, at the end, but it happened so fast, you know.
He was planning to get him and his wife and his children out when the thing hit.
Right, right, because his van, he had to move his van over here, and he was planning on getting them out. So I guess when he went back in, he got trapped.
Willie's sister-in-law was killed in the storm, and his brother, who warned him about the twister, is still undergoing treatment at a local hospital. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
The severe weather siren sounded in Montgomery, warning residents of the twister that had been sighted west of town was moving to the northeast. The tornado first touched down here near Rigsby and Lower Wetumpka Road. The Delta Market was dead in its path. Market manager Harold Boswell was inside.
The whole roof came off, and they had two girls in there, and they were screaming in the hall, and I was trying to get them in the back. So we got in the back, closed the door, and we held on for about 5 minutes. It was over.
The twister then continued on its northeast course, tearing through the Chisholm and Highland Garden residential areas. Here's what it left in its wake. Dipping and churning, the tornado then drew a bead on the heavily traveled northern bypass. This is where 4 people died. Commuters driving into town found themselves literally in the midst of the storm. Their cars and trucks were snatched from the pavement and strewn along the rights-of-way. Police say a Wetumpka couple, 46-year-old Donald Causey and his 47-year-old wife Judy, died on this highway. They say the other victims are 39-year-old Lawrence Wynn and 31-year-old Carl Stevens, both of Montgomery. 2 truck drivers survived, but not without being shaken by what happened.
Did you see the tornado coming?
Oh yeah, it hit me right back there. I told my partner that was it.
The wind started blowing and it got so dark you couldn't hardly see, and I was trying to get past where I could get off the shoulder of the road, and the next thing I know, the wind got that trailer and truck, and up it went and over.
Authorities did not know how many others might have died. They searched the marshy fields along the bypass, but they found no more bodies. On the other side of the bypass, the twister took another life. Patricia Washington died when the twister demolished her mobile home. Her body was recovered amid the rubble that covered much of the Madison Park community. The injured were taken to Baptist Medical Center and to Jackson Hospital. At last word, more than 30 people were hurt. About a dozen of them are still hospitalized. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA TV News reporting.
So we're doing it now. Now we've got good at the mobile home wind. Okay.
Senators spent many hours on the budget that funds most state agencies, but most of the time was spent listening to the clerk read the lengthy budget document, not once, but twice. Senator Donald Holmes is mad because he and other senators say they can't get some of their own local or pet bills passed because Senator Hank Sanders is using Senate rules to block consideration of those bills. Senator Holmes says reading all bills at length is one way he's showing he's upset. Following the general fund budget is the governor's income and property tax increase measures and the 2.2% electric utility tax on municipalities. Across the rotunda, the House overwhelmingly approved a once controversial measure which would let beer and wine distributors draw up exclusive territories. The territories don't affect one brand from competing against other brands. It means there will be only one Budweiser distributor or Miller distributor or so on in any given area. Opponents of the bill say this creates a monopoly, which will eventually drive up the price of beer. Proponents say it will protect the quality of beer and the complex distribution of beer and wine taxes within the areas. That bill now goes to the governor. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.